So today we're going to talk about focal lengths and what's the right one to use. If you saw our last video, we went through all the gear in our bags. Eric went through all of his stuff and I went through all of mine. We talked about it and why we like to use certain lenses in certain situations. So I got home and I was thinking of an idea for today's video, and I said to myself, maybe it would be good to show, using all of these lenses photographing the same subject. And then I said to myself, well, let me see if my daughter will sit for me. And she said, okay, surprisingly. I set her up here in the den right here, and the lighting wasn't great, so the white balance is a little off. But I was really surprised at how I went through every lens in my bag. And I'm going to show them to you from the longest all the way down to the widest. So we're going to start with the 70 to 200. This exercise was really just to show how different focal lengths affect a portrait. You can get away with wide angle lenses shooting buildings sometimes, and it gives it the world bends a little bit and it kind of looks funky sometimes. But with people's faces get distorted really quickly once you start to use wide angle lenses. So that's really what I wanted to show with this little exercise here. So the 70 to 200, this first shot is at 200 millimeters at f2.8. The other settings really don't matter here. It's just to get an idea of what the background will look like. I tried to compose these exactly the same. So as you can see here, there's a nice soft background. And if you look behind me, you can see this room. It's more of a long, wide room. And to use the 70-200, I had to go all the way behind me there, like to that couch on the other end, to actually take this shot. Whereas with the last lens I used, with my fisheye, it was about an inch away from her nose. So this is what happens with different focal lengths. They really affect what's going on in front of and behind the camera. 70 to 200 lens, generally considered a very good portrait lens. My favorite lens to use when I'm shooting portraits, because I can still use the 70 if I want to get a full body shot in and then quickly adjust the focus and get a headshot, something like from here to here. I like the out of focus background. This is a good portrait lens that I would really want to use. Next, we went to my 135 f2 Rokinon. And this one has a really nice background. As you can see, it's out of focus. Now this is a manual lens, and I was using the Z6ii, which I'm shooting on today also because I had some focus issues the last time I shot with this camera. So we're going to see how it goes. I'm shooting with the 50mm 1.8 lens at 1.8. So the Rokinon is a very nice lens. Feels like a professional lens. The images I get out of it are really, really nice. It's manual focus though. So with the focus peaking, I was able to, as I was focusing, actually see my daughter's eyes highlight in red, which is what happens. You can pick any color you want, but when something is in focus, it'll actually show like a highlight of whatever's in focus as you move it in and out through the scene. So as soon as I saw her eyes were in focus, I took the shot. And if you zoom in close here, you can see it did a really good job. So the manual lenses I wouldn't be afraid to use with the Nikon Z with the focus peaking. So from there, I did something. I went with the 70mm end of my 70 to 200 at 2.8, which is this shot here. You have a nice out of focus background, not like when you zoom into 200. And then I used my 24 to 70 at 70mm, but that's an f4 lens. So here's what f4 looks like on that. So if you look at the two of them, it's not that much of a difference, a little bit. So the next lens is the 50mm 1.8 at 1.8. 50mm is a good focal length. You still get a nice image. Nothing wrong with this. I do like a little bit of a longer lens to shoot portraits, but in a pinch, this is great. The out of focus area is nice. Really nice lens, and I'm loving it. And as you can see right here, there's separation between the background and me. So it's a good lens to have in your bag. I'm really enjoying the 50mm for the Z cameras. Then I went to the 24mm end of my 24 to 70. And this is where you start to get in trouble. So if you look at this image, you can tell that it just doesn't look good. And this is what happens when you start to use wider lenses and you're shooting people. So while it may be cool to have a 24mm as your walk around lens during the day if you're out with your family, you just have to realize that you're going to get distortion if you want to take a picture of your kids, or let's say there's a nice family moment you'd like to take a picture. If you step back and kind of spread the scene out, it will be okay, but you still might get some bending in the horizon and things like that. close-up of a single person portrait is 24 millimeters is not something that I would want to use. Okay, the next lens is, I went with my 16 to 35 Nikon f4. So this is at f4 and this is 16 millimeters. Practically looks like a fisheye. So again, anything under 35 millimeters or really 50 millimeters, I wouldn't use a wide lens. I would like to stay above 50 millimeters and on with portraits, ideally 85 millimeters and higher. So 85, 135, 70 to 200, with anything above, you know, the 70 millimeter mark, you'd probably be okay. 16 millimeters looks terrible. I would never want to shoot anybody like this. It's just not flattering. And just for fun, I took out my 8 millimeter fisheye. And you can use this to shoot people, but you have to know it's going to get cartoonish looking. Now, in order to try to frame this image the same as the other images, I literally was this far away from her face, and I was so close that the camera wouldn't even focus. So usually wide-angle lenses will focus at any, you know, focal length. Like, it doesn't matter because they're so wide. It's an 8 millimeter lens that it doesn't matter. With this lens, I was so close to her that it actually wouldn't focus. I think the minimum focusing distance is like 1.5 feet, and I was closer than that, but I was trying to get the framing right. But as you can see, it bends the world. So could be fun sometimes. I like to use a fisheye sometimes at arm's length and, you know, take a shot like that, and that looks cool sometimes. But I wouldn't use this for portraits. I just thought this was interesting. Quick little video this week. Weather's starting to get a little better here in New York. It was cold this week, but I can't wait to get back outside. It's a rainy day today. I don't know if you could tell, it's kind of dreary out and just done with winter. Really just had enough. Ready to get outside. So just to finish up, I would say for me, I like a 70 to 200. The versatility, the fast autofocus, they just really give you a lot of options when you're shooting portraits. And one of the things you have to remember, if you're shooting portraits, even if it's with kids or your family, nobody wants to sit around and wait while you fumble around with lenses. And a 70 to 200 gives you the ability to quickly move around from different focal lengths without having to reach in your bag, you know, to say, oh, I want to take my 85 out, now I'm going to take my 135 out, and I got to move back 20 feet, now I got to move up 15 feet to get close. You can do it all quickly while you're keeping a rapport going with your subject, and I think that's important. You know, sometimes it's, you know, the gear is great, but if you're taking a picture of somebody and you want to get a nice reaction or maybe a nice smile, you have to develop, you know, like a relationship with the subject, and where you can talk and you can laugh and it's comfortable. And if you're awkwardly fumbling around with gear and moving things around and, you know, constantly checking things, you don't want to do that. It's much easier to just keep shooting and talking, and you know, before you know it, you'll have 50, 75 pictures taken, and there will be some keepers in there, I guarantee it. I'm going to put our 2 videos from the last 2 weeks here. These are the what's in our bag videos. It's pretty interesting to see us go through our bags, you know, why we have what we have and why we use what we use when we use it. Okay, so I'll put Eric's here and I'll put mine here, and I will see you in the next video.